Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Congregation Near Tamid in San Francisco. My name is Charlotte Hyman. I'm the president of the congregation. It is so wonderful to see so many of you tonight for this wonderful 4-part series featuring Noah Levy. We are so thrilled that she has offered us this wonderful opportunity. Congregation Ner Tamid is a conservative synagogue in the Sunset District of San Francisco. We welcome you to check out our website, nertamidsf.org, and join us for services for our Hanukkah sing-along next Saturday night with our Rabbi Shana, Cantor Rudy, Rabbi Reuben, and Achi Ben Shalom. It's on Zoom, and if you check the website, you'll find out about our wonderful services every Friday night at 6 and Shabbat morning at 9:30. They are on Rabbi Shana's YouTube channel. Everyone is always welcome at Ner Tamid, and we hope that some of you will check out our wonderful programs, Torah study, and join us. We look forward to meeting you. And now I want to tell you that the chat will be on during the program. And Noah has graciously offered to take a few questions. She may not be able to get all of your questions because of time, but there are 3 more lectures, and you have plenty of opportunity to ask her your questions and enjoy her programs. So I would, at this time, like to turn the evening over to Noah Levy for her wonderful lecture. Noah.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I'm so thrilled to be invited here to this really wonderful congregation, which in fact, my first performance in the US when I moved here was at Congregation Ner Tamid. It was almost 5 years ago. And so I'm thrilled to have come a full circle and be with you all again. So I'll say just a few words about myself for those of you who've never met. I'm originally from Israel. I was born in Jerusalem, and I moved to San Francisco 5 years ago to live with who is now my husband. I am what we call a mutt. I'm a child of a Mizrahi parent and an Ashkenazi mom. Mizrahi dad and Ashkenazi mom. My dad is originally from Turkey and Egypt. Those are my grandparents on his side, and my mom, her parents were from Poland. And I consider myself as living kind of happily in both worlds. And you'll learn a lot more about what I'm talking about when I say Mizrahi and Ashkenazi, and how much that has an effect when we're coming to talk about Israeli culture and Israeli music. And yeah, when I was 3 years old, my grandparents found me at an Independence Day concert on the stage, dancing with a singer. So I guess music's been in my blood since I was very young. And I'm also apart from just performing and singing, which I've been doing my whole life, I'm a total bookworm. I love to study. And that's what kind of gave birth to this lecture, where I'm hoping to combine my passion for music, for Israel, and love of learning, and share it all with you. Okay, so that's it. Enough about me. And I think let's get started. I'll share my screen. We've got a presentation which has a lot of video links, and I'm hoping that we'll manage kind of jumping from one screen to another, but if there's any issues, please bear with me with patience, and we'll figure it out. All right, so here we go.
And Noah, just really quickly, for people that have questions, are we going to wait to the end? Are you going to break for questions? What's the plan for that?
I think we are waiting till the end. So I think the chat is open to ask questions, and then once we're done for this part of the lecture, I can look at the chat and maybe pick through some of the questions that are there. Is that okay?
Perfect.
All right. Okay, let's see here. All right. Okay, so Israel's history and song. This is a complex subject, and we're going to cover in a very, very short amount of time, almost 150 of music making. And there's a lot of material that I'm going to cover, and sometimes you'll feel like I'm just breezing through things. But I really hope to kind of dedicate as much time as I can for each period, and cover many topics, mentioning the important people, but also making sure that we have time to listen. So what are we talking about when we're talking about Israel or Israeli anything? There's a lot of debate whether or not if there is such a thing at all. Is there Israeliness? Is there an Israeli culture? Some people say that there is definitely a distinct Israeli culture that you can tell in the food, you can hear it in the music, you can see it in the TV and movies. But some people say that Israel still is just a bunch of different influences that haven't really merged together into something. So this is the question: are we talking about a soup or a salad? Can we pick apart the ingredients, or is it all meshed together and there's some new flavor that came out? In my opinion, there's definitely a distinct Israeli style and an Israeli sound when we're talking about Israeli music. And what I hope to show you with this lecture is how all these different ingredients, all these different influences did merge together into something that we can identify as being new and unique on its own. All right. So here's another example. You can see that all the different melange that Israel is with just by looking at people's faces. These are all important Israeli characters and individuals, and you can tell that most of them just look, it's all over the map. It's kind of hard to spot an Israeli, unless you are Israeli, which we usually can tell. We can tell who we are, but a lot of people, there's not sort of like necessarily a look. Same thing with the food, gefilte fish or jachnun or hummus. All of these things are considered Israeli food, even though they're all kind of descendants from other cuisines. But let's start at the beginning. I'm not going to talk a lot about history here. This is an ethno-musicology lecture, which means that we are mainly looking at music as it kind of shows us what happened in history and how they're influencing each other. I'm sure you guys have done your Jewish 101 or Israel 101 education, and you will know. I don't need to tell you what is Zionism or what is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I'll try to mainly focus about the music part of things. And so here we are. We're looking at 19th century Israel. We have the Ottoman Empire is what's going on in Israel at the time. Very small percentage of the population, about between 5 and 10%. And very bad conditions, very, very bad conditions, very poor, tough land, not a lot of cultivation. The people who were there were not well off. It wasn't like a desired place to live or anything like that. An example of that is you can see here on the left, the picture with a woman sitting down. This is actually a picture of Moshe Montefiore, the famous Jewish philanthropist, and his wife in one of their multiple visits to Israel. And I thought this picture was very appropriate to our times, as they wrote a lot about quarantine, as they had to quarantine when they arrived in Israel because of the cholera pandemic, which was a disaster back in the 19th century. And sort of that's what you had when you came to Israel. You had plague, you have poverty, heat, mosquitoes. It was tough. Okay, but at the same time, we have at around mid 19th century, we have the evolution or the kind of birth of Zionism and the idea of the coming back and settling in Israel, kind of developing in the back of the mind of Jews around the world. As far as music though, up until then, there hasn't been particularly a lot of creative music making that we know or that's been documented, apart from an interesting character. Here are some more pictures kind of documenting the first Aliyah. The main person that we know of that is that was a composer that its creative work was kind of documented in a collection of books is a person named Israel Najara. He was this is way back mid kind of like 16th century. He was the most established composer until then that wrote things that were associated with Judaism, and interestingly enough, he used Hebrew, predominantly kind of liturgical Hebrew, but he combined it with Muslim or Islamic music or Islamic style of composing. Let me try to share with you. Hold on. Share with you an example of what the music of Israel Najara might have sounded like from what we can assume. His work was collected in a book that's called Chanting of Israel, Zmirot Yisrael, and that's been preserved, and people have been kind of trying to arrange it based on what was written in those early compositional books. So here we are with Yisrael Najara. Okay, I'll hold it right there. As we said, we have a lot to get through, so I can't really play everything till the end. But what we notice here, and you see the words kind of popping up on the screen, as it is Hebrew. It is written in Hebrew and completely sung in a Muslim or in Islamic style. This is actually a love song, and it's most of love songs back in the day are love of God or love of Israel. So basically this is, as far as we can tell, the earliest example of Jewish music, or this is apart from, of course, klezmer and other influences that were in Eastern Europe. But klezmer music was not necessarily written in Hebrew, and these are songs that were written with using the Hebrew language. Okay, so we are moving on from here and diving into the first Aliyah. And as we all know, Aliyah, the going up, like the Aliyah to the Torah, going up to Israel. First settlers, those were originally very small quantities. Some of the images we have here, probably I should move all of you here. We have the famous Baron Rothschild, along with Montefiore, who I've mentioned before. The first early settlers relied heavily on help from philanthropists, Rothschild being one of the most famous ones, who helped establish multiple cities that today we know of as such as Rehovot and Rishon LeZion, donated a lot of help and helped with infrastructure to kind of get things going for the first settlers that came, because as I said, there was nothing much. The Ottoman ruler did not invest at all at making life so easy. It was more like controlling the area and having a lot of border control points, and not about cultivating and growing the land. So we are moving on, and oops, that's not what I meant to do. This is what I meant to do. Hold on. Yep. We are moving on, and again, this is on the left here, one of the most famous photos of Herzl, the probably the most recognized figure when we say Zionism. We think about Theodor Herzl. This is one of his first trips to Israel, a very famous photo that was taken on a boat. Again, you can see pretty much nothing. Everything had to be built from scratch. We'll talk a lot more about what we see here in this picture, but this is sort of a way of showing how the people that came at first, where the numbers were few, where they relied heavily on each other and mutual help, and the function of social life, which is practically just sitting and singing after night falls and you can't do any more work, singing songs and dancing on a Saturday, or celebrating together. So the role of music became a very, very important in the Israeli culture and tradition further on, as a way of showing solidarity and relying on songs and as a way of communication and shared memories and shared experience. So we'll talk a lot more about that, but as you can see, this picture shows it well. All right, so here we are. This is, as I said, some early photos of Rishon LeZion, the first kindergarten, and the first band right here in the bottom. And the reason why I mention a kindergarten, because if you think about it, the settlers who came in the first Aliyah, perhaps most of them were from Eastern Europe. Perhaps they came in small numbers and groups of people who knew each other and could share a language. But as numbers grew, the problem of language became quite a problem. The ability to communicate with each other, having children that were maybe being born and of different descent, that's where Hebrew basically was born. Modern Hebrew was born from the need to communicate with each other, and the new children that were being born in this new country to have something new and a new communication tool to give them. We'll see in a minute the kind of more development of Hebrew. But when we come to talk about music, and I said that, people sat around and sang songs, and that was the main social life. And so what were they singing? What was being sung? We've heard from Yisrael Najara that there was a lot of Muslim influence, Islamic style of singing using maqams. Maqams are the Islamic scales, which sound completely different than our Western scales. And then that is more of the North African Judaism, which today we tag or stereotypically say Mizrahi Jews. And on the other side, we have the Eastern European immigration or descent, the Aliyah from Russia and its surrounding, that had heavy influence of Yiddish and klezmer and Balkan music. So before we go into that, the most classic example of how Jewish music or Israeli music, the first songs were created, we can see really nicely in our anthem, in the Israeli anthem. It's considered people attribute the lyrics to Naftali Herz Imber, who traveled around and was very impressed. This is already at the time where Zionism is very much talked about in Europe, and he traveled as kind of just to go to Israel and see and live what it means to make an aliyah, and what does it mean, the Zionist dream. And he wrote the lyrics for this song. This is his own handwriting, which is pretty impressive that we have this document. I don't know how many of you over there in the Zoom can read Hebrew. You can see that the lyrics here are actually not exactly the same as what we sing today. Let me try to get rid of this over here. Yes, there are a couple of differences that were made after this document has been written. It says Ir David, the city where David has parked. So, changes have been made. But what I want to talk about is the music, the composition, the melody. The story goes that Naftali Herz Imber did not compose this song. He just wrote the words. The actual melody is a peasant song, is a Russian peasant song that some guy was humming to himself and came across a book of poems by Naftali Herz Imber and was heavily impressed by this poem for Jerusalem and for the hope for the Israeli people, and combined the two, combined the Russian melody with the Hebrew words. It's a very famous story, and here we are going to listen. This is the original Russian peasant song.
Electricitate, căi ferate și vapori, încă nu erau aflate, mergeau toate fără zori, căci bătrânii erau moi, își mânau carduri cu boi, ăștia, 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 ăștia.
I didn't check that everybody can hear okay. I'm just assuming that I would get a lot of red flags if there was a problem with the audio, so I'm gonna go on. You can hear it's pretty funny. This seminal Jewish song with or Israeli song with this kind of folksy, happy melody. And another funny anecdote: the words in the original, I don't know if you heard, is hoisa, hoisa, which is what we use in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew. It's a colloquial way of kind of whipping a horse when you want him to gallop faster. And so the association of the anthem, the Israeli anthem, with a basically whipping a horse to ride along. Okay, so an example of what Israeli music was made of back in the day was basically pastiche. They would take words in Hebrew and put them on existing melodies. one style of melodies were Eastern European melodies, peasant songs, which we'll see a few more examples in a bit. And of course, the other example is the Arab surroundings that surrounded the people living in Israel at the time. So a lot of Bedouin and Turkish melodies that that people heard around them, and they became kind of like very catchy earworms, but they made them Israeli, or they made them their own by adding Hebrew words. We'll talk more in a bit. So let's see some more examples. Hold on, sorry. Okay. Here's an amazing example, and one of the famous people that nobody knows, this guy, Eliakim Tzunzer, he has a very interesting story, and he's considered the first Zionistic poet. He wrote about 600 songs. Not a lot have preserved till today, but his name was very, very well known, and throughout his life, he was born, as you can see, early, quite before the development or the thriving of the Zionist movement, but he became associated with the Zionist idea later in life, and wrote a lot about the Zionist message. Interesting to say that he worked as a joker. Joking, or in Hebrew it's called badchan. Bdicha is a joke, and he was an entertainer by profession. He would be hired in Jewish weddings to lighten the mood. After the ceremony was over, he would start singing and just create merriment all around. So he was a very happy, enthusiastic guy, even though he had quite a tragic life story. He lost, I think, 7 children to cholera and his first wife as well, but he still kind of kept this optimistic spirit. And he wrote a lot of songs, and I would say it was hard to pick which one to play for you. He is more of the Eastern European school of music, so he used Yiddish and Russian music style, or Balkan Eastern European melodies for his composition. He was the composer and the lyricist of the songs that he wrote. He wrote predominantly in Yiddish, but later, as Hebrew developed, he made an effort to translate his songs to Hebrew. And when people compare the two, they see how the Yiddish it makes a lot more sense, and it's a little bit more, you can relate to it, whereas the Hebrew is kind of clunky. It's more of that biblical Hebrew that we know, that some of the stuff is not very, it's sort of Shakespearean and not very as folksy as I think the original intention was. Funny, I don't know if there are musicians in the audience, but from the look of this sheet music, another rare document that I'm very happy to have my hands on, the sheet music is backwards. If you can see, this is how fierce the Zionists were about making everything Israeli and Hebrew and their own. So even the sheet music is kind of read from right to left. Traditionally, of course, the clef symbol is on the left in almost all sheet music, and of course, still today, sheet music in Hebrew is not read this way anymore. They sort of gave up the idea because it's completely confused everybody. But sort of to match the way we read the lyrics, the Hebrew is from right to left. They also kind of placed the notes, but it made it quite impossible for people to play as they learn to play from left to right. So Another interesting thing, we see here an odd time meter. So this is a 6/8 time signature, which also is something that we in Israeli music using different kinds of meters and having kind of more interesting rhythmic variations and styles is a great influence both from Balkan music and of course from Islamic and Bedouin and Arabic styles who have a different kind of way of associating with rhythm, which is very uncommon in Western music. I would say 90% or 80% of Western music is written in traditionally in 4/4. Okay, so enough about the theoretical music things. Let's hear it. This song, which I chose, he wrote originally in Yiddish, and he tried to translate it to Hebrew. It's about a rose, the Shoshana, very famous Hebrew name, Shoshana, and the song, it tells the story about the poor rose, the miserable rose, that it's being tramped on and abused, and it's lonely, and she has no pity, and it tells the rose, wait until we all collect each other and go to Zion. I chose this song on a bias because I found a version of it sung by one of my favorite Israeli female singers. Her name is Chava Alberstein. Chava Alberstein, very, very, very famous and very important figure in Israeli culture. She later in life also sang a lot in Yiddish and tried to kind of help revive the deep and diverse heritage of Yiddish culture and music. So here we are. Without further ado, let's listen a little bit to The Rose by Eliakim Tzuznel and sung by Chava Alberstein.
הדרך שמה מתגוללת שושנה חכלילת עיניים נדפת מסר עליה נובלת שוכבת פה מיומיים והיא מתחננת לכל נוסע אנא אישים חנוני שמרו צעדיכם במנגו אפל ברגליכם תרמסוני אנא חנוני מעפר הרימוני פן אהיה למרמס רגליים בידכם שאוני אל עדן גני אל גן מחמד עיניים
All right. I'm sorry. It's always hard and difficult to stop songs in the middle. I should say that I promised to create a playlist with all of these songs so that you can go back and I can send it after the lecture or after the full series with links so that you can go back and listen. And if you have any questions regarding those names that I mentioned, I can definitely rename some of those important figures. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about modern Hebrew. If you haven't met this guy, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, he's one of my heroes, quite a phenomenal character, extremely strong. He I think pretty much by himself revived the Hebrew language. He was given a book in Hebrew. So Hebrew until like late 1880s, or perhaps 1850s, was considered sacrilege to use Hebrew as for anything but religious ceremonies or religious purposes. Liturgical Hebrew was sacred, and it was saved only for conversation about spirituality and religion. However, secretly, Eliezer ben Yehuda in his yeshiva was given a book, my apologies, I can't remember which classic. I think it was either Don Quixote or something like that, that somebody secretly translated to Hebrew, and he fell in love with the idea that Hebrew should be used as the language for Jewish people in the aid of the Zionist dream, as a tool for communication, as a tool to talk about Zionism with people from all over, because it was catching on like fire, and you know, all over. And the problem of communication and kind of talking about the idea amongst with people who had different languages was a real problem. So he decided he was going to create a modern Hebrew they can use and speak to in real life. And he was ostracized by the religious community, and there were a lot of people against his initiative. He with his wife, who deserves almost as much credit because she supported him throughout the way. She was from a wealthy family, he was from a very poor. Her family adopted Eliezer ben Yehuda, and later on he convinced her to move with him to Israel to revive Hebrew as a modern language, and she went with him. They moved to Jerusalem. He was studying in his study almost 24 hours a day, making up words, just trying his best. He created the first dictionary, a dictionary that I used when I was going to high school, the Ben Yehuda dictionary. And a little anecdote is that when his son was born, he insisted and made his wife swear that they will not speak any word apart from Hebrew in the household, that this child will be the first child who will be fluent in Hebrew, whose Hebrew is his the native tongue. And his wife agreed, and the child Itamar was born and grew, and he said he didn't say a word. He would just not speak. His dad, Eliezer, insisted that he won't leave the house so that he won't be exposed to the languages that were spoken out in the street. We're talking Jerusalem. So back in the day, this is Ladino, this is Arabic, a little bit of Yiddish, no Hebrew in the street. And the child just didn't speak. The mom got worried that there is a problem, and tried to convince Eliezer, but Eliezer was very resistant, even though everybody around, the rabbis, would come and they would say, "What are you doing? This is wrong. This is creating a problem." He insisted. Finally, the story goes, this is a story told by Itamar, the child himself, that his first word was said in Hebrew, trying when his mom and dad were arguing, and he saw his dad getting very upset on his mom, and he said "Abba" to try and stop him. And so Eliezer ben Yehuda, a very notable character, and kind of coming back to the subject of this lecture, he played a very important role with first creating the newspaper and writing and in spreading, trying to help sending postcards and everything in Hebrew, and collaborating with composers to write songs or help them kind of find words in Hebrew for their compositions. We will see quite a few of those coming later on. Here is another story of how all of a sudden people had words to put onto their songs. One of the groups of settlers that belonged to the first Aliyah were called the Biluim. The Biluim were students, predominantly socialist students from Russia, that came, very idealistic, came to settle in Israel. The story of this song, which is one of the earliest songs that we have documented in Hebrew, is this group of Biluim sat around the campfire after marching by foot to Jerusalem from Rishon LeZion, one of the early settlements. This was a very long journey and they were all tired. And they started singing songs in Russian and or Slovenian, could be both. And somebody said, wait a minute, we are here in Israel, we should sing in Hebrew. And of course there was a lot of alcohol and they were maybe a little bit drunk, and they started translating on the spot. So that already tells us that there is Hebrew. There is enough Hebrew to go around that they had words to use that were not biblical. These words that we see here are not necessarily biblical Hebrew that we can see in our Siddur. They're also, this is not the best poetry I've ever seen. This is pretty simple, basic Hebrew. You could tell that this was done in a hurry. So, chushu achim chushu, hurry brothers, hurry. This is a song about how let's all get together and go to Israel, and we'll hear both versions. I found quite very nice examples. This is the Hebrew version. Oh, sorry. Nope, this is the original. That's the Hebrew version. Let me play the Slovenian again. Hold on, because I missed that. Here we go. What we see here is a segment from a very nice television show that was done where people got together and sang some of those songs, and I'll present a few clips from this show later. Okay, so we have this idea of pasting, kind of translating, but now we have some more Hebrew, modern Hebrew, basic words to put on these songs that they brought from home. I don't think I'll have time to play you this amazing song. I will definitely put this on my link on my YouTube playlist that I will create, but you should be familiar with this poet Shaul Chernichovsky that we have here on the left. And this is a song that kind of sums up the spirit of the first Aliyah, this yearning for Israel, the Zionistic idea put into words. This is beautiful lyrics written by Shaul Chernichovsky. I will definitely show it later. And we are going to see another example, but a different kind of influence. So I've said we have the songs from back home of the early settlers, the Biluim, mostly from Eastern Europe, Balkan, Yiddish styles. And then I said, once they've moved, they were very heavily influenced from the culture around them, which was mostly Bedouin or Turkish music. Here's an example for, we're moving on now. We had a lot of songs about the Zionism, the love of Israel, about the urgency to come to Israel to make an aliyah. And once they got there, the songs were mostly about what they did, which was working. A lot of work songs. So we'll see this later on. This song is called, simply put, the work song, about working all the time. Don't rise up, let's stand together. And then we have this very bizarre Ya Chaylili, Ya Amali. Let me move here this so that you can see the transliteration. Ya Chaylili, Ya Amali. And those of you who speak Hebrew know that it doesn't really make sense. This is all the rest of the song, the rest of the lyrics in Hebrew. This is, by the way, the original version, again written in this time in handwritten. The rest of the lyrics makes total sense, but then we have this Ya Chaylili Ya Amali, which is not really in Hebrew. We can, maybe there are some words like chai, but together it doesn't make sense. So the story goes of this song is again, somebody heard while working at the field. This song was written by Noach Shapira, the lyrics in Hebrew, but he heard this song while working in the field from another Arab worker. He really liked the melody, but he wanted to use Hebrew lyrics so that they would feel more proud about singing it out loud. And he rewrote Hebrew lyrics for this tune that he heard. It took me a lot of digging, and I found a pretty intimidating version of the Arab original. Let me first play, I hope this time I'll get the right link, but let me first play the Hebrew version of this song. This is the Hebrew. Nope, hold on. Oops, be almost there. This should be the Hebrew version of the song. Hold on. Oh, and there we go. Okay, if we were kind of seeing each other, I would ask you, what do you hear here? And usually the answers I get is, this sounds kind of like a march, perhaps, Russian march song. The singing style is, what we associate sort of with that sound of or style of music. And this is because this is an arrangement that was done for this song much later. The recording is much later than the original, than when this original song was composed, was written. So now let's hear the influence for this composition. You'll have to pay close attention. This is a very modern arrangement for the original Bedouin song, and it's kind of hard to hear. So pay close attention. I hope you guys could hear it. Ya halali ya mali, ya halali ya mali, which is what we see here in this song, Ya halili ya amali. And with time, also the words were changed. So ya mali is in Arabic, was switched around to ya amali, which is a Hebrew word for amal is work. Perhaps when Ben Yehuda was working on his dictionary, he used this amali, which is could be considered as an Arab root, and he used it as well to signify work. And so this, how the music and all these influences could work together. Hearing people working in the field and this word amali, and then using that word itself as a word for work or for labor. All right. Let's move on from here, and we venture into the second aliyah. I chose these, there are so many photos and pictures, it's hard to choose. I want to mention here, right at the bottom, Rachel, the poet, and Leah Goldberg, both female, amazing female individual poets and entrepreneurs and amazing women that made a very strong influence on Israeli culture. And I also want to say that women were very dominant in those times. It's quite amazing to see so many important women that were able to be, or worked very hard to be treated as equal. Even though life was very hard and there was a lot of extreme labor and also a lot of guns and military work involved, and also in cultural work there are almost as many famous women from those early days. And we see here on the right a little stamp about, there was a series of Israeli stamps that paid homage to children's songs. And we'll talk a lot more about how Hebrew was, a lot of the Hebrew was written for the children, for the kids. Like I say, like the story of Itamar ben Avi, the son of Eliezer ben Yehuda, in the first kindergarten in Rishon LeZion that we saw a picture of. They needed songs, they needed stories, and they all needed to be written at the time. So let's see some more examples. The second Aliyah was more of this socialist movement from Eastern Europe. Almost, I think 20,000, almost all of them were from that area. However, there was also predated that there was an immigration from Yemen. So we do see immigrants from kind of North Africa as well. It wasn't all Eastern Europe just in those days. But predominantly the second Aliyah is considered the socialist, the Eastern European, the students with a lot of idealistic spirits. They had 4 important ideals: mutual help and relying on each other, conquering work or labor of the land, conquering or learning how to guard, learning how to protect themselves and stand up and use weapons. These are things nobody knew, coming from where they lived back in Europe, and conquering the land. So this is where we start to see things are more in terms of conquest and taking land and making a stamp and claiming a territory. Yiddish, Russian, Polish, Slovakian, Latvian, all of these were spoken at the time. The first kibbutz, the famous Israeli institution that we know, was formed in the second Aliyah, and Gania is the first kibbutz. But I want to talk about music. So first I'll show you an amazing archival footage that I found. This is Life in Israel, 1913. Oops, no, that's not what happened. Hold on, going back. Why didn't that work?
עתיד להיות הטכניקום בחיפה אשר ייפתח
I'll
בחודש
translate it as
אפריל
we go
בשנת
along.
1914.
This is the Technion in Haifa being built.
אל הקומה השנייה ובקרוב
And
יעלו
those
עליו
are all, of course, Zionist settlers, even though the narration mentions that in specifically. Look at the way they dressed. They're dressed. It's the needs of the climate, the sun, and all of that. They completely changed the way they dressed. Let's move on and see some more of this. We have this is Tiberius. Back in the day, mostly Hasidic Ashkenazi. So a lot of religious communities that were already established in Tiberias and Safat. And all right, let me show you some more. Working the land. This is quite amazing that they have this footage. We'll see some more of that. Yep. All right, let me see. Okay, moving on from here. I will now show you another song. Let me just go back to presenting. Here we go. This is a song I like to teach everybody usually in the lecture itself, so that everybody feels like they know a little bit of Hebrew. It's very much with the timeline of the spirit of the time, what life were about. So Boker ba, morning comes, la'avoda. We go to work. Tzaharaim ba la'arucha, erev ba la'menucha, laila ba la'asefa. So no time basically for sleeping here. Maybe you get a little rest with evening, but you know, this was the rally song that was singing. That was the spirit of the time. That's what people were doing. And we know that because here we have a video of an amazing woman called Rachel Yanait. She was also the wife of Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, the second president. An amazing pioneer, an amazing woman. She's done so much, but she was one of the early settlers of the second Aliyah and original member of the Shomer. The Shomer was the institution that was formed for the purpose of guarding and protecting the early settlements. So learning how to shoot a gun, learning how to establish patrols, learning how to shoot from a horse, and all of those sorts of things. And as I said, you can see it in the picture here at the top. Rachel Yanait is at the bottom, and you can see that, you know, there are 2 women out of 7. It's a nice percentage for something so considered manly and masculine. So here is Rachel Yanait. This is a story song. This is her singing this Boker Ba song.
המקהלה, בוקר בא.
בוקר בא.
בוקר בא. בוקר בא לעבודה, בוקר בא לעבודה, בוקר בא לעבודה, בוקר בא. צהריים, 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 צהריים בא, צהריים בא לעבודה, צהריים בא לעבודה, צהריים בא.
She explained how this song was sung, and they arranged it according to her. She's very funny. This is a very funny interview, and I can again share it with you later. But she was saying how important songs were and how they stuck with it for morale, for rallying, for communicating, for sharing things together, for expressing emotions. And they were so proud of singing Hebrew, singing modern Hebrew, for using it as part of their life. She's very, very expressive about that, and the importance of songs in those times for people. Again, this is menucha, asefa. These are modern words that actually probably menucha not, but asefa. And this is more modern way of Hebrew, what we associated with a Hebrew way, modern way of speaking Hebrew, rather than biblical Hebrew that we see in those earlier versions of songs, those more poetic, more biblical style. All right, let's move on from here. I'm looking at the clock here, and I think I will have to skip this one. But we are talking about more areas of Israel now being settled. This is, in this case, the Galilee. So settling more in more areas, going into places that were not already settled by Jewish, as I've said, Safat, Tiberias, and Yaffo, and Akko, and Jerusalem, were already had Jews in there, living there for centuries. So these are new settlements and new areas that were taken or conquered by those early settlers. Let's move on. Whoops, no, not this. Let's see if that works. Here we go. Here we have the first orchestra, and we have the organization of teachers. They don't look very approachable, if you ask me. But the purpose of this picture is to say that the kids that were living in that first kindergarten, Rishon LeZion, by this time are high schoolers, and there's a need for math books, there's a need for geography, there's all these things, and we want to be, this needs to be new. We don't want to be like the old days, like with a ghetto in Poland. We need, all these things need to be in Hebrew. So the organization of teachers, that it was formed for the creation of more books, more tools to help teach in Israel in Hebrew. Okay, we will see, and now something I like very much to talk about, another famous man that nobody knows, Akiva Aryeh Weiss, here on the left. We see in 1906 the foundation of Tel Aviv, a very famous photo of these settlers here in the left and in the right, a group of about 70 people that came with a purpose of settling outside of Jaffa on a land that was purchased by Akiva Aryeh Weiss and other individuals, land that was bought for the purpose of settling. There's nothing but sand. Nobody knows how they're going to do it, but they come. Akiva Aryeh Weiss was such a visionary. I think he's, like a Bill Gates. He said, in 100 years from now, Tel Aviv will be Manhattan. And it's pretty amazing when you look at this photo, and there's nothing. I don't know, what are you seeing? What I see, Akiva, I don't know. But this is how it was done. This photo here is this map that basically what they decided, they took this piece of land and divided it into lots, and they made a very famous lottery using shells that you see here on the left, where every family was, or couple or an individual was got his lot with using the shells that they collected. And we will see, so 1906, this is all happening. They're arriving on a boat and starting to, it was very elaborate, the founding of Tel Aviv. But here is a video of just a few years later, not that long, and 1913. This is the port of Jaffa. And here is what Tel Aviv looks 7 years later. The song that's playing in the background is Who Will Build a House in Tel Aviv? Mi yivne bayit b'Tel Aviv. This is Neve Tzedek. Yeah, he's saying 4 years ago there were only 10 houses here. Hundreds and hundreds of houses are being built. This is the Rothschild Avenue. 100 years ago. Very peaceful. Not so peaceful today, but those were the days, and still amazing, quite amazing. Back to our to music. Now we are moving on in time, and we are with the third Aliyah. Important characters that come here is, of course, one of them is Ben Gurion, and here in the right, and we have Trumpeldor, Yosef Trumpeldor, associated with founding and dying for Tel Chai up in the north of the country, another very impressive individual. And we see here more as the struggles became stronger, both with the Ottoman rulers, the British by that time, and with the Arab population that grew more and more resistant to the arriving of those growing numbers of settlers. So we see more more emphasis on fighting, military and defense. We see here on the bottom left, the political party was being formed, the party of the workers of Israel, Mifleget Poalei Eretz Israel. Later, the acronym was used, Mapai, very important back in when the first Knesset, it was a very important party till pretty much the 80s, I would say. So let's see what was going on with music here. Here we have definitely we see modern Hebrew. We see the word kvar. We see the word aval. These are all this is modern Hebrew that we use today, and conjugation that we see here. The themes again: work, 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 work. But funnily enough, they are saying, we're working so hard. However, we are still not seeing quite the fruits that we wish for. So this is sort of like, we're doing this for the future. Very idealistic, a lot of hope. Life was very hard, but they basically pushed forward for a vision that was in their minds. We came to Israel to build, but also to be built. This is the bottom, very important line that became very famous. Shmuel Navon, the person who wrote the lyrics and the music for the song. So now we see people using Hebrew and composing. This is songs written in Israel, first Israeli songs. I will play another example of this sort, but I want to kind of move along to make sure that we get to everything. We're now at the fourth Aliyah, and I want to talk about Baruch Agadati. So I said music, but there was also dancing, and not many things are as associated with Israeliness as the Hora. Baruch Agadati is one of the founding fathers of the Israeli Hora. Circle dancing is, of course, we didn't invent that. And we see that in almost every culture. But the Israeli Hora dancing has a distinct style. These are dances. These are choreographies that were being made, and it was used as a tool for emphasizing solidarity. This is a dance where you're supposed to touch each other. You're supposed to put your hand on the top of the shoulders of another person and give them energy and get energy from them. Baruch Agadati, he was a dancer. He moved to Israel, and he was a professional dancer. And when he moved to Tel Aviv, which was by then flourishing and already became kind of like a cultural mecca, and worked as a choreographer and later on as a cinematographer. We have here on the right, the first, it says, Zot hi haaretz, this is the land. Seret ivri rishon, first Hebrew movie. And it says, ivri mamash, really Hebrew, because it is speaking and singing in a living Hebrew language. Ivri mamash, because it is made entirely in Tel Aviv. Ivri mamash, because it was taken from our land and our deliberations and struggles here in the land, in Israel, in the Aretz. Bo benarichem, come everybody, youth and old, and feel the joy of creation and the pioneer effort. Very impressive announcement for the first Hebrew movie, and worry not, we're going to see a glimpse from this movie in a bit. I know that Alan here in the audience reached out to me, and he I'm sure can shed a lot more light about Hora dancing and Israeli dancing and some of the history of some of the songs and their creations. Maybe in the end he can say a few words. But the other impressive initiative of Baruch Agadati is creating the Ad Lo Yada. Ad Lo Yada is the Purim celebration, which we celebrate until this day. Basically an extravaganza of dancing in the street and a lot of floats that were being built. And he established the first one and cultivated it, on top of music making and on top of basically choreographing Israeli dances. And the picture here on the left, I could probably do a survey and ask what you think, but I don't know if anybody would say that this is the first Israeli beauty queen. Surprising, but it is. They did a contest in those Ad Lo Yadas, and they had, of all things, they had a beauty contest. And here we are with the winner. Let's see some of those celebrations. Here we are. This is the Ad Lo Yada in Tel Aviv. I think this is 1937. We see many people in the streets, but I don't know if you notice all the decorations that were being made. Already everything out in the street, all the stores, everything is in Hebrew. So there's no doubt that this is a new place with a new language. Here is a marching band. We see this, there are some British soldiers kind of monitoring. It's kind of hard to see, but you see quite amazing floats. These are cars that were dressed up. All of this, the work of Baruch Agadati, important for me to mention. All right, I have to move along. Perhaps if I have time, I can also show you one of his dances. There is a, if you do Israeli dancing, maybe some of you may be familiar with a Hora Agadati, a Hora that was choreographed, we assume, by Baruch and preserved, or either that or was choreographed in his honor. Hold on, I got stuck a little bit here. Here we go. And if another, we're talking about important cultural musical figures, I want to mention the incredible Bracha Tzafira. Bracha Tzafira, let me make this bigger. Bracha Tzafira, perhaps I should say the first Israeli superstar. She was very famous and also had an incredible life story. Was an orphan and moved around from different foster families that had different cultural backgrounds, and as a result of that became immersed in different singing or just speaking and styles and accents. as you can tell, she was quite stunning. She was very skilled, and she became very involved with a composer that was incredible, became instrumental to Jewish music, Nachum Nardi. So they worked together, and we'll see couplings like that later on in the second lecture as well. Bracha Tzafira and Nachum Nardi, she would perform his composition, and he would say that his compositions wouldn't sound good at all if it wasn't for her performances. She also rewrote some of the songs that she knew, rewrote them in Hebrew, or worked with Nachum Nardi to arrange them again as Hebrew songs. And she was fluent in Arabic, and we will see an example of her singing both actually Turkish and Hebrew. Actually, let's do that right now. This is a famous song that is a Turkish song, and Bracha helped rearrange it in Hebrew. Oops, sorry, not this one. No. Oops. Should be this. This is just a clip, a musical clip. I'm afraid I couldn't find a visual version. You'll have to listen. This is an Ottoman Turkish melody sung first, or lyrics sung first, and then the Hebrew lyrics were written by Bialik, Chaim Nachman Bialik, which was probably our most important poet. Here we go.
يا حسر البال كان يصري انت يا احلى ناس نظري قالك تسلم لي عمري. وبعدك من عطاب تكون لا روحي فتزاب.
All right, I have to cut it short. I'm sorry. Let me go back here. This song is very famous. It became a hit also later on in Hebrew. So she's showing how she's basically helped morph it into a Hebrew song, even though originally she heard it as a Turkish melody. Let's see her now. We have the privilege of seeing her performing one of the most classic Aliyah associated songs, La Avoda Vela Melacha. Avoda, work, Melacha, craft. Here we are. The words are again by Chaim Nachman Bialik. Write the name down. A very important figure for us. This is Nachum Nardi. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll have to cut this short. I want to talk a little bit about, from a musical standpoint, about the song, because I think, to me, this really is starting to sound like Israeli music. And why so? Nachum Nardi, the person on the piano, it's absolutely clear that he's a classically Western trained pianist. all his style of playing is definitely influenced from that. Baracha Tefira, her style of singing, the little nuances and the melismas that I don't know if you can hear in the quality of the recording, much more Arabic, much more kind of Arabic influenced style of singing. However, when they play together, it's starting to sound very comfortable to those two approaches, those two styles. They sound good together. Earlier on, when I took the Ya Khaylili Ya Amali, and I played the original Arabic version or Bedouin version versus what became of it, which sounded more like a march, there was no fusion. There was taking the words and putting it on something, and it sounds either Arabic or Eastern European. I think with this performance, you can see something quite different with this style of singing that works perfectly well together with a different style of playing. And so the examples that we'll see from here on, we'll see more and more of that. And in fact, Bracha Tefira and the Chumnali, they were a couple that, that was what interests them about working with each other. Nahum Nardi fell in love. Well, I don't know, they were not married, but with her approach, with her style, of course, you can see she's very charismatic. But what he liked was her approach, her ethnic style that was different from what he learned, and she was attracted to his virtuosity on the instrument and his compositional skills. So you could see that this is the beginning of perhaps a melting pot or a soup happening here, something that works well together so that you can't really tell it apart. I want to also say a quick fact that I wanted to mention early on in the beginning of this lecture. Of course, today there are 9 million people living in Israel. Out of them, 74% is Jewish. And we have, out of those 74%, we have a half of what we call Ashkenazi and another half that Ashkenazi descent, and what we call another half of what we call Mizrahi or Sephardic descent, which we'll talk more about this distinction and how important it is in the culture. But what not a lot of people know is that it's in 1995, it was documented that 25% of the Tzabarim, the people born in Israel, are actually children of interracial marriages. Racial, I would say, maybe probably inter-ethnic marriages. Like me, as I said, I'm half Sephardic, half Ashkenazi. Perhaps it was the influence of Nahum Nardi and Baracha Tefira, who gave an example of working together and no problem, and seeing what's good and collaborating and loving the differences. Perhaps that served as an influence and of course there was a big motivation by the institution for merging, for not noticing the differences, that we're all Jewish and we're all together. That kind of fell apart later around the 50s, but we'll get there. But for now, what we see here is a pure musical collaboration between different ethnicities. Whoops, sorry. Let me move on. I think we'll have time for only one more, unfortunately. I'll just talk briefly about this slide. We are now at the 5th Aliyah. Things are happening. I don't need to go into this history. A lot of rebels, big fights with the Arab population, resistance to the British mandate, strong efforts to fight against and getting kind of rights of the land. you can read about that in the history books. Here is an example of what was going on in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is now becoming a cultural mecca, as I've said before, and European influences, but also from all over the world. This is a Hebrew version of a Bertolt Brecht, The Threepenny Opera, a translation of that. I don't know if you can hear.
רבותיי, עוד הלילה אשטוף בו הכלים ומיטה לכל איש אציע.
She is a
ואתם נותנים לי פני ואני מודה
very important Israeli actress, Hannah Meron.
ואיש אינו יודע מי הוא מה אני. ואיש אינו יודע מי הוא מה אני.
So if we were talking about translation by drunken Biluim about 40 years ago, back in the first Aliyah, now this is translation of a high piece of art that is done. It's an impeccable work. When you read it in Hebrew, it's amazing work of translation. So Hebrew is now definitely a happening, living, standing on its own as a language. I will move on. Oops, sorry. One again. Last but not least, I'll show this incredible movie, a beautiful song to show you how songs were made. And again, they were made by the dozens. It was so important to create the culture in Hebrew, to create the music. This was all they had to do, and it really helped with preserving the energy and the motivation to work so hard for, like they said, for something that was not quite there yet, for an idea and a dream. This song is called Shir HaEmek. It's associated with the establishment of Ez Emek Yisrael and cultivating it. And it was written by Daniel Sambursky, a famous composer of the time. And it shows, the story goes that they were sometimes composing these things on the spot. So we will see here in a minute, this is a kibbutz, and everybody's sitting around for dinner. There's always a piano, and the composer would sit and try out a new song, teach it to the group, and they would sing. And that's basically the origins of the famous Shira Betzibur that we have till this day, the sing-alongs that we love so much, singing together. If the song was good, it caught on. The composer would hear people humming it later, and that's how he knew he had something, and worked hard and sang it again at the next night, and the word would spread, and that's how songs were created. So let's see an example of a video. I think this is from the Spielberg archive of playing this Shir HaEmek, and I'll try to leave so that you can read the lyrics. Fellas, listen. Silent in Israel. I will leave this on. So he goes on and on, but I will move on forward. They show examples of people singing this in all of their activities. Now everybody learned it, and they're singing it. And now the song is catching on. Here's singing it in the morning, while making dinner, while shaving. So this is sort of like a promotional video, a propaganda of okay. I see that my time's up, unfortunately. Okay, let me get out of here. Okay, I think this is where we'll stop for today, as I see that it's already a little bit past 8:30. I will now try to get back to find the chat here on my screen and see. Here we are. Okay. I think. Okay. So, let's see. Where are the questions or concerns?
It was mostly no comments in the chat, not a lot of questions.
Not a lot of questions. Now,
but maybe we can ask people if they have questions now to put them in the chat, and you can take them one by one.
Okay, hold on. I'm still trying to find the chat so that I can maybe comment on some of these. Oh, here we are. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, Romanian, not Russian. I'm guessing that was for the Tikva. Okay, thank you. Any Bracha Mizrahi, Norma Tarot? Yes, I think you're referring to Bracha Tzefira, which I mentioned before. Yes, she was. Hold on, I will tell you. Can't remember exactly her origin. She was, as I said, she was an orphan. I don't know. I think she was Yemenite. She moved around from foster families, but I think she was Yemenite. When was the first? Okay, time periods. Yes, no problem. So first Aliyah, we were talking generally about 1882 till 1904. The second Aliyah, 1904 to 1914. 1919 and 1923 is this third Aliyah. It's a little bit, the distinctions are a little bit rough. Usually they make those distinctions by the kind of the population that immigrated. But there was immigration going all the time. And the fourth Aliyah, which is sort of like where we are right now, is 1924 till 1929. And by then there were about 80,000, I think, people immigrating. Numbers were much, much larger. Thank you, Alan, for providing the information about Bracha Tzefira. Alan, if you want to say a few words about Baruch Hagadati or any Israeli dance that you know that was originated or choreographed from the time.
Yeah, I will. Baruch Hagadati, actually, he did create Hor Hagadati.
Yeah.
It's the only Israeli folk dance he ever created, and it is actually considered the very first Israeli folk dance ever created, and it is still danced to this day. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I have a video of a Hora Agadati, of the dance, that I can add to the playlist. Yes, I see 6/8 as a jig time. It's also it's a blue. There's the musical signature is used in different forms as well, not just the jig, but yes, it's also a jig. Let's see if I missed anything here. I think, Habonim. Okay, that's very nice. And okay, here we go. I think somebody asked a way to contact with information. So here I will post. I don't know if I can post to everybody. Everyone. Here we go. So this is my email. It's also my website. And I want to say to Amal. Amal is found in the Torah. Oh, yes, that is probably correct. I think what I meant, if I wasn't clear, that it could be an example of back in the, a lot of the words in the Torah are also associated with other languages as well. And there was a lot of back and forth with Arabic and Hebrew. But I meant using Ben Yehuda using words in Arabic in his modern Hebrew dictionary, or Arabic roots in modern uses. Maybe not particularly the word amal for work, but as an example of using that for writing Hebrew words and music and lyrics. Any more questions or anything? All right, I think silence, the crowd goes mild. So next time, I'm hoping to go breeze through the Choma and Migdal, the preparation for the founding of the State of Israel, the fight for independence around the war, the 1948. And you're welcome, Harvey. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. And then we'll start talking about the 50s and the early frictions that starting to rise between in this great solidarity that we've seen so far with these early settlers and early pioneers. Okay, I'm hoping to see or I'll go and see the gallery. Hold on, so that I can see everybody, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, here we are. I'm just seeing everybody here, so at least I can say thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody being here. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry if I made some mistakes in dates and times, and this is a lot of material, so I beg your pardon, and I appreciate feedback and corrections, so thank you so much. And I hope to see you all next, actually, the second lecture is in 2 weeks from now. Next week is Hanukkah, and there are a lot of celebrations. I encourage you to attend the one coming up this Friday, I believe, and share in there Tamid. And Saturday. See you all December 21st. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.